My daughter-in-law kicked me out of my own home, but when I returned with a buyer for the house, her confident facade crumbled, and the truth finally came crashing down. I still remember the sound of the suitcase wheels against the hardwood floor. That slow, scraping sound that meant something final was happening. My daughter-in-law, Amber, stood at the doorway with her arms crossed, her face cold as marble. "Harold," she said, her tone sharp, "it's been 3 months. You said you'd stay just until you got things sorted. Well, it's time. I need my space back." I looked around the living room, the one I helped my late son David paint before their wedding. The cream-colored walls, the old piano in the corner, the family photos lined up on the mantel. Every inch of this place still had his touch. "Amber," I said quietly, "I just need a little more time." "The senior complex I applied to, their waiting list's still backed up," she exhaled loudly, annoyed. "That's not my problem. This is my house now. You can't just keep living here rent-free." I wanted to remind her that half of the down payment had come from me, that David and I had built the deck out back together, that my fingerprints were literally in the foundation. But I didn't. I just nodded slowly and said, "I understand." Amber walked away, her heels clicking on the floor like punctuation marks. From the kitchen I could hear her on the phone, laughing. That hurt more than anything. That night I packed quietly. Every sound felt amplified. The creak of the closet door, the rustle of shirts. On David's dresser I found an old photo of him holding a hammer covered in sawdust, grinning at me. "We'll finish this house together, Dad," he'd said that day. I sat on the edge of the bed and whispered, "Guess we didn't, son." When morning came, Amber didn't come down to say goodbye. She left an envelope on the kitchen counter. For the utilities, she'd scribbled. Inside was a $10 bill. I loaded my truck and drove off. The driveway gravel crackled under the tires, the house shrinking in the mirror until it was just a blur behind me. For a week, I slept in a cheap motel off Route 19, the kind with flickering lights and thin walls. I spent my days driving aimlessly, through neighborhoods where people still waved to each other, where porches were filled with laughter. I missed that sound. One morning I stopped at a diner. The waitress, an older woman named Carol, poured me coffee and asked if I was okay. I told her the short version: lost my wife, lost my son, and now, apparently, lost my home. She looked at me for a long moment and said, "Honey, sometimes people kick you out just to make space for karma to move in." Her words stuck with me. 2 weeks later, I found a small rental on the edge of town. It wasn't much: leaky faucet, crooked blinds, and the faint smell of paint thinner. But it was mine. Every evening, I'd drive past David's old house, just to look. Amber had changed the curtains. The lawn was overgrown. One evening, I saw a for sale sign go up in the yard. I parked across the street, engine off, and just stared. "She's selling it?" Part of me wanted to march up and ask why. The other part, the quieter, wiser part, told me to wait. The next morning, curiosity won. I called the number on the sign, posing as a potential buyer. The realtor, a cheerful woman named Denise, said, "Yes, lovely property. Widow of the late David Carlson, correct? She's looking to sell fast, but says it carries too many memories." I smiled faintly. "I suppose it does," I said. When Denise asked if I wanted to schedule a tour, I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said. "Let's set it for Friday morning." That Friday, I stood once again on the front porch I'd built with my son. Amber opened the door. Her smile froze midair when she saw me. "Harold?" she whispered, stunned. "What are you—" "I'm here for the showing," I interrupted calmly. Denise blinked, looking between us. "Oh, you two know each other?" Amber's voice cracked slightly. "He's my father-in-law." "Well, that's wonderful," Denise said cheerfully. "Maybe you'll want to buy it back into the family." Amber's eyes flicked toward me, pale already. She had no idea what was coming next. Amber's forced smile trembled like a leaf in the wind. "Come in," she said stiffly, stepping aside. Her voice carried that edge of nervous politeness people use when they're afraid of what's next. I walked in slowly, every step echoing in the hollow quiet of the house. It smelled different now, artificial, like air freshener trying too hard to erase the past. David's framed photos were gone. His tools no longer lined the entryway bench. The piano sat untouched, covered with dust instead of music. Denise's cheerful voice filled the silence. It's a beautiful three-bedroom home. Open layout, plenty of natural light. Built about 12 years ago, correct? Amber nodded stiffly. Yes. My late husband and his father built most of it themselves. I traced my fingers along the doorframe. That's true, I said softly. Every nail, every board. Denise looked pleasantly surprised. So you were part of the original construction? I smiled faintly. You could say that. Amber glared at me. Harold, I don't know what you think you're doing. I'm looking, I said evenly, just like any interested buyer. Her jaw clenched. We moved from room to room. I asked questions, polite ones, but specific enough to rattle her. What kind of insulation did you use here? Still the foam board David ordered? Or did you replace it when you remodeled? Amber hesitated. We kept most of it. Good, I said, glancing at her. That was quality work. He'd be proud. For a moment, she looked away, blinking fast. Guilt, maybe, or something close to it. In the kitchen, Denise went on about features, marble countertops, updated fixtures, stainless steel appliances. But I saw beyond all that. I saw the pencil marks on the wall near the pantry, where we'd measured David's height when he was 10. They were faint, but still there. She hadn't scrubbed them off completely. When we reached the back deck, I paused. The railing had been replaced. I could tell by the grain. The old cedar had been stripped out. David and I had spent a full weekend building that deck. It was where he told me he was proposing to Amber. I leaned on the new railing, staring at the yard. I see you've redone this, I said. Amber crossed her arms. Yes, it needed an upgrade. Denise smiled politely. It's quite lovely now. Perfect for gatherings, I nodded. Gatherings, I repeated. David wanted to build a fire pit out there someday. Guess he didn't get the chance. Amber's throat tightened. Can we move on, please? Denise nodded, flipping her clipboard. Of course, let's head upstairs. Upstairs, the hallway walls were bare, stripped of memories. But as I passed the master bedroom, I saw something glinting beneath the bed. I stooped. An old brass picture frame, dusty but intact. It was a photo of David smiling beside me, holding a paintbrush. The same day we'd finished painting the living room. Amber's eyes widened when she saw me holding it. That must have fallen. I'll take it, I said simply. Wouldn't want it ending up in a box somewhere. Denise didn't notice the tension between us. Would you like to see the basement, Harold? I'd like that, I said. Amber followed us down, her step sharp, impatient. The basement light flickered once before warming to life. The smell of damp concrete filled the air, familiar, grounding. I looked around and smiled faintly. Still solid. David and I poured this foundation ourselves. Denise clapped her hands together. Well, it certainly seems sturdy. You two must have done fine work. Amber's phone buzzed. She turned away, whispering harshly into it. No, not now. He's here. Yes, him. Just handle it. I raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. When the tour ended, Denise turned to me. Would you like to make an offer? I smiled politely. Not yet. I'd like to think it over. Amber let out a breath, half relief, half confusion. Good, she said quickly. We have other interested buyers anyway. Oh, I'm sure you do, I said. But before I go, Amber, would you mind if I stop by next week with a friend? He's very interested in homes with history. Her eyes narrowed. What kind of friend? I slipped the photo frame into my jacket pocket. A serious one, I said quietly. He believes every home tells a story, especially the ones that start with family. Amber's lips pressed tight. Fine, she muttered. But this isn't some kind of game, Harold. I want this sold fast. I nodded slowly. So do I. As I walked down the porch steps, I could feel her watching me from the doorway. The look on her face told me she suspected something. She just didn't know what. And she was right. Because next week I wasn't bringing a buyer. I was bringing the one man who could make her entire story collapse. The following Thursday, the sky was low and gray, the kind that hinted at rain, but never delivered it. I stood on the sidewalk outside 1247 Maple Street, watching as a dark sedan rolled up the drive. The engine cut off, and a tall man in a navy suit stepped out, carrying a slim leather briefcase. His posture was calm, confident, and quietly authoritative. Amber was already at the front door, phone in hand, eyes darting between us. You must be the buyer, she said, forcing a smile. The man extended a hand. Good morning, Mrs. Taylor. I'm Samuel Grant, property acquisition specialist. She shook it cautiously. Nice to meet you. Harold didn't mention much about you. That's all right, Samuel said, his tone measured. I prefer to let my work speak for itself. We stepped inside, and the silence felt heavier than usual. Denise, the real estate agent, wasn't here today. I'd made sure of that. This wasn't a showing for a client. It was a reckoning. Amber led us into the living room. So, what kind of properties are you looking for? Samuel set his briefcase down and opened it with a soft click. Inside were several folders, neatly labeled. I specialize in foreclosures, estate transfers, and properties under legal dispute, he said, flipping one open. Particularly homes with unclear ownership histories. Amber's brow furrowed. Excuse me? I stayed quiet, watching her face closely. Samuel continued, calm as ever. This address came to my attention after a title discrepancy was filed with the county assessor's office. Seems there's a conflict between the original deed holder and the most recent signature on record. Amber's voice tightened. What are you implying? That depends, Samuel said. Would you like to explain how your late husband's father's name ended up missing from the property transfer? Her lips parted, but no words came out. I'm sure it was an oversight, I said evenly, leaning on the banister. Paperwork's tricky, especially when people sign things they shouldn't. Amber took a step back. You set this up, she hissed. Samuel closed the folder. Mrs. Taylor, I'm not law enforcement, but the people I work with are very interested in legitimate ownership verification. I'd advise transparency. It tends to go better that way. Amber's face flushed red. This is harassment. I've done nothing wrong. Samuel looked unbothered. Then you have nothing to worry about. She stormed toward the kitchen, snatching her phone. I'm calling my lawyer. That's a good idea, I said softly. Maybe he can explain how you refinanced a house you didn't fully own. Her hand froze mid-dial. What? Samuel placed another folder on the counter. The refinancing documents list you as the sole proprietor. But county records still show partial ownership under the Taylor Family Trust. That trust, Mrs. Taylor, requires 2 signatures for any sale or refinance, one of which belongs to Harold. The blood drained from her face. Samuel continued, professional and unhurried. Forging a co-owner's signature is a Class C felony in this state. But as Mr. Taylor said, perhaps it was just a misunderstanding. Amber's voice trembled. You can't prove anything. Samuel slid the papers across the counter. You'd be surprised how good ink analysis is these days. For a long moment, the only sound was the refrigerator humming softly. I broke the silence. Amber, when David died, I promised I'd honor what he built. You wanted me gone, fine. But you don't get to erase my son's legacy just to make room for your next opportunity. Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't from remorse. They were from fear. You can't just come here and threaten me. Samuel snapped his briefcase shut. No threats, Mrs. Taylor, just facts. You'll be hearing from the title investigator this week. In the meantime, I'd suggest postponing any sale attempts. Amber's breath came fast. So that's your buyer, Harold? Some investigator pretending to make an offer? I smiled faintly. No, Amber, that's the man who's going to make sure my name, and my son's, stay on the record where they belong. She glared at me, shaking. You're vindictive. I'm thorough, I said. And tired of being treated like a guest in a house I built with my own hands. Samuel turned toward the door. I'll be in touch, he said quietly, then nodded to me. When he left, Amber's mask cracked completely. She sank into a chair, shaking her head. You're going to ruin me. I leaned against the counter, calm and steady. Amber, you did that yourself. I'm just making sure the truth gets a fair showing. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The rain that had threatened all morning finally began to fall. Light, persistent, cleansing. I turned toward the door. I'll be back in a few days, I said. And next time, I won't be alone. Amber looked up, voice breaking. Who else could you possibly bring? I paused, hand on the doorknob. Someone you shouldn't have lied to. And with that, I stepped out into the rain, leaving her staring through the window, pale, silent, and finally realizing her story was unraveling faster than she could spin it. The next morning, Evelyn woke up early, her heart still pounding from last night's confrontation. The sound of the slammed door, Mark's trembling voice, and Sarah's silent stare echoed in her mind. She poured herself coffee in the small motel kitchenette and stared out at the parking lot. The sunrise was golden, but it felt hollow. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Turner, this is Margaret from Oakwood Realty. I heard about your situation. If you're open to talking, I might have a solution for you." Evelyn frowned. "A realtor?" She almost ignored it, but something in her gut told her to call. When she did, Margaret's voice was calm, steady, almost reassuring. "I specialize in buying homes fast," she said. "No tricks, just fair market value. I heard your daughter-in-law might be planning to sell, but the property's still in your name?" That last part hit Evelyn like a spark in dry grass. "Yes," she said slowly. "The deed is still under my name. My husband and I paid off that house before he passed. Mark was supposed to take over payments for taxes and maintenance, but—" She trailed off, realizing what Sarah must have been plotting. Margaret's tone shifted slightly. "Then she can't legally sell without your signature." "But you could sell it first if you wished." Evelyn set her cup down carefully. Her hands trembled. "I could sell it?" she whispered. "Absolutely. If you want, I can meet you today and go over options." 2 hours later, Margaret arrived, a sharp, confident woman in her 50s with kind eyes. She listened quietly as Evelyn explained everything: the eviction, the manipulation, the betrayal. Margaret didn't interrupt once. When Evelyn finished, the realtor leaned forward and said gently, "Mrs. Turner, sometimes life gives us a chance to take our dignity back. If you sell the home yourself, it's your choice who benefits, not someone who cast you aside." Evelyn hesitated. The thought of letting go of the only home she'd known for 30 years felt like tearing out a part of herself. But then she pictured Sarah's smirk when she shoved the suitcase toward her, the way she called her a burden. "I'll do it," Evelyn said quietly. "Find me a buyer." Within days, things moved faster than she could have imagined. Margaret listed the house discreetly, reaching out to a local investor couple who were looking for a home in that very neighborhood. They toured the property and made an offer immediately, above asking price. Meanwhile, Sarah and Mark noticed small changes around the house, strangers stopping by to take photos, a drone camera hovering for real estate shots. When Sarah confronted one of the agents, the reply made her blood run cold. "Oh, Mrs. Turner, I'm not sure who you are, but we're working directly with the owner." That evening, Sarah stormed into Mark's office. "You knew your mother never changed the deed?" she shouted. Mark blinked, panicked. "What are you talking about?" "She's selling the house," Sarah yelled. "Do you understand what that means? If she sells, we have nothing." "You better fix this." Mark's face drained of color. He'd tried calling Evelyn, no answer. He drove to the motel where she'd been staying, but the receptionist said she'd checked out that morning. All that remained was a small note left at the desk. "Mark, I love you, but this time I need to protect myself." Mom, by the end of the week, the paperwork was signed. Evelyn sat in the real estate office, hand steady as she signed the final line. Margaret smiled warmly. "You've just taken your life back, Mrs. Turner." When the funds cleared, Evelyn requested a simple transfer, part of it to her new apartment lease, part to her savings, and a quiet donation to the local community kitchen she used to volunteer for. It felt poetic, giving back while letting go. The same afternoon, Sarah returned home to find a notice taped to the front door. It was official, notice of sale completion. Property ownership transferred. Her face turned pale. Mark came home minutes later, reading over the paper in stunned silence. "She actually did it," he whispered. Sarah's hand shook as she crumpled the notice. She wouldn't. She couldn't. But she had, and there was nothing they could do. A moving truck appeared 2 days later. A young family stood at the gate, laughing, hopeful, holding a small box labeled "Kitchen Stuff." Evelyn watched from her car parked across the street, tears in her eyes but a soft smile on her lips. Margaret turned to her. "You don't owe them any more pain, Evelyn." "You gave them enough chances," Evelyn nodded. "It's not about revenge," she said quietly. "It's about peace." She took one last look at the home where she'd raised her son, where laughter once filled the walls, and where sorrow had nearly broken her. Now it stood as a symbol of freedom, and though Sarah and Mark stood in the driveway, speechless, powerless, Evelyn finally felt something she hadn't in a long time. Now closure. The sale had gone through, and for the first time in years, Evelyn felt the air around her lighten. She had spent too many nights under that roof holding her breath, afraid of saying the wrong thing or being told she no longer belonged. Now she was finally free. She moved into a cozy one-bedroom apartment in a quiet senior community not far from the town's park. The walls were freshly painted in soft cream. Sunlight poured through the balcony windows, and her few pieces of furniture fit perfectly. On her first evening there, she brewed a cup of tea and sat by the window, listening to the sounds of life outside. Children playing, a dog barking, distant laughter. It was peaceful, not lonely. Her phone rang. It was Mark. For a long moment she hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Finally she answered. "Mom," Mark said quietly. His voice was shaky, unsure. I don't know what to say." Evelyn took a slow breath. "Then don't say anything," she replied gently. "Just listen." There was silence on the line. Then she continued, "Mark, I didn't sell the house to punish you. I sold it to remind myself that I have a right to live with respect. That home was full of memories. Your father, you as a boy. But it had turned into something else. I couldn't stay trapped in the past, not when the present kept pushing me out." Mark's voice cracked. "Sarah said it was temporary, that we'd help you find somewhere better. I didn't know she meant every word," Evelyn interrupted softly. "I saw it in her eyes, and you didn't stop her. Maybe you were afraid, maybe you were tired, but you didn't stop her." He didn't argue. The silence spoke louder than excuses. After a while he whispered, "I miss you, Mom." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled faintly. "Then show it. Not with words, but with how you live. Be the man your father raised you to be." They talked a little longer, about small things, about how he was doing at work, how she was settling in. When the call ended, Evelyn set the phone down and stared at the fading sunset. For the first time in a long time, she felt a fragile kind of hope. Days turned into weeks. She made new friends at the community, kind people who invited her to morning walks and bingo nights. She joined a book club, even baked cookies for the group's next meeting. It was a quiet, steady rebuilding of a life she thought was over. But one Sunday morning, as she returned from the market, she noticed a familiar car parked near her building. Mark stepped out, holding a small box. His eyes looked tired but sincere. "Mom," he said softly. "Can I come in?" She nodded. He followed her upstairs, and as soon as he stepped inside, his shoulders relaxed. "This place suits you," he said, looking around. Evelyn smiled. "It's small, but it's mine." Mark handed her the box. Inside was an old photo album, the one she'd thought was lost when she left the house. Sarah packed it away. "I found it when we were cleaning the attic." She flipped through the pages, seeing faces frozen in time. Her husband, her younger self, Mark as a child with his first bicycle. Tears welled up again, but they weren't bitter this time. "She's gone, Mom," Mark said quietly. "Sarah left last week. Said she couldn't live in someone else's mess. I guess she didn't like the idea of starting over without the house." Evelyn looked up, meeting his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mark," he shrugged, a sad smile tugging at his lips. "I should be the one saying that. I let her control too much. I lost sight of who I was, but seeing what you did, it woke me up. You didn't yell. You didn't fight. You just walked away and took back your life." Evelyn reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "That's all any of us can do when someone tries to take our peace. Walk away with dignity." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The air between them was quiet, but not heavy. It was healing. Later, as Mark stood to leave, he turned at the door. "Would it be okay if I came by again? Maybe bring dinner next time?" Evelyn smiled warmly. "I'd like that." When he left, she stood at the window, watching his car disappear down the road. Her heart ached, but it wasn't the sharp pain of betrayal anymore. It was the soft ache of letting go, of understanding that sometimes love means giving people the space to find their way back. That evening, she sat on the balcony with her tea and a book, the city lights flickering like tiny fireflies in the distance. She thought about her husband, about all the nights they'd dreamed of a peaceful life together. Somehow she'd found that peace, just in a different way than she'd expected. And, as a cool breeze brushed against her face, Evelyn whispered to the night, "I made it. Henry, I finally made it." Down below, laughter from the park echoed faintly. Life went on, But for Evelyn, it was no longer something that happened to her. It was something she had reclaimed, one brave choice at a time. The woman who had once been thrown out had come back stronger, not for revenge but for her own peace, and that made all the difference. The next morning, Evelyn woke to a bright, clear sky. It felt different somehow, lighter, freer. The apartment smelled faintly of the cinnamon rolls she'd baked the night before. For the first time in months, there was no tension lingering in the air, no lingering fear of confrontation. Just peace. Her phone buzzed. A message from Mark. "Mom, can we meet for coffee later?" "I think it's time we do something together." She smiled and typed back, "Absolutely." "I'll see you at 10. At the cafe, the small table by the window was already set for 2. Mark arrived, looking more relaxed than she'd seen him in years. He hugged her gently. "Morning, Mom." "Morning, son," she replied, feeling warmth bloom in her chest. They ordered coffee and sat quietly for a moment, just watching the town wake up around them. "I wanted to tell you something," Mark began, a hint of excitement in his voice. "I've been thinking a lot since all this happened. About the house, about Sarah, and about how I treated you. I realized I want to do better. Not just for me, but for us." Evelyn sipped her coffee, nodding. "I see that. And I believe you, Mark. But I also want you to know, healing takes time. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight." He smiled faintly. "I know, I've got time. And I want to start small, maybe helping you with some of your projects. The garden, the community activities you love." Evelyn's eyes softened. "I'd like that. You know, Henry always wanted the garden to be full of flowers that made people smile when they walked by. Maybe we can do that together." The conversation shifted naturally, moving from small talk to shared memories, laughing about Mark's childhood pranks, stories about Henry's stubborn habits, and tales of the neighborhood that made them both smile. It was easy, as if a weight had been lifted from both of them. Later that week, Evelyn received another unexpected call. It was from the real estate agent who had handled the house sale. "Evelyn, I have good news," the agent said. "The buyer is very interested in preserving the property. They want to honor the family who lived there before. They've requested a small personal tour." Evelyn was pleasantly surprised. "That's wonderful. I'd like to meet them. When can we arrange it?" Within days, she found herself showing a young couple through the house she had once called home. The rooms were empty now, the walls freshly painted, but the echoes of laughter, family dinners, and quiet Sunday mornings still lingered in the air. She walked slowly, pointing out details: Henry's favorite armchair by the window, the kitchen where they had baked countless pies, the little reading nook tucked in the corner of the living room. The couple listened attentively, their eyes warm and appreciative. "It feels like stepping into someone's memories," the woman said softly. "That's exactly what it is," Evelyn replied. "This house was full of love. I hope it can be full of love for you, too." Walking back to her apartment later that day, Evelyn felt a sense of closure she hadn't expected. She realized that even though the past had been painful, it had shaped her into someone resilient, someone who could face betrayal, loss, and fear without losing herself. Mark stopped by that evening. Carrying a small box filled with seeds for the garden they would start together. "I thought we could plant some flowers this weekend," he said. "Henry would have loved it." Evelyn laughed softly, a genuine heartfelt sound. "I think he would. Let's do it together, son. Let's make something beautiful." Over the next few months their bond grew stronger. The garden blossomed, full of color and life, just as Evelyn had dreamed. She began volunteering again, teaching local kids how to grow their own little gardens, sharing stories about resilience and the power of patience. Mark often joined, carrying tools, laughing, and helping her teach the children about responsibility and care. As autumn arrived, Evelyn sat on her balcony one evening, sipping tea and looking at the vibrant leaves swirling in the wind. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The house on Maple Street was gone, sold to someone who would honor it. The daughter-in-law who had caused so much chaos was facing justice, and Mark had rediscovered the values his father had tried to instill in him. Evelyn whispered to herself, "I survived, Henry. I kept my dignity, my peace, and my heart intact. And somehow I even found joy again." Mark called from the garden below. "Mom, look at this, first bloom." She smiled, setting her cup down and walking to the balcony to see the tiny flower pushing through the rich soil. It was a small but powerful symbol, a reminder that life continues. Beauty returns and new beginnings are always possible. For Evelyn, this was more than a house sold. A betrayal survived or a relationship mended. It was the reclaiming of a life she refused to let anyone diminish. The laughter, the love, the memories, they were hers, preserved in her heart, stronger and more vivid than ever. And as the sun set over the quiet town, Evelyn knew she was ready for whatever came next. Not with fear, not with anger, but with grace, strength, and the unwavering certainty that she would always come back to herself, no matter what.